Accused boyfriend of forgetting my birthday and choosing his sister over me, but later discovered he was struggling alone after losing his job and tried to hide it so I wouldn't be burdened or hurt. I thought he'd lost affection for me. That's the way it felt anyway. You know, when you're the one who loves someone and they start to pull away in tiny, almost non-existent increments, it accumulates, like layers of quiet dismissal. And pretty soon you find yourself sitting there wondering if you were ever enough in this place to begin with. We'd been together 3 years. The kind of relationship that was real, earthed. Not flashy, not wild, just constant. Reliable. He wasn't a romantic, but he seemed to always pop up when I needed him. He'd deliver soup to my bedside when I was sick, text me good luck before a meeting, and magically always know when I was about to cry even if I hadn't spoken a word. That's the kind of love that hums softly. But when it starts to fade, it's blaring. It began quietly. He was absent, little things, coming late to texts, showing up exhausted, recalling what I told him yesterday. I brushed it off initially. Maybe he was just stressed. Maybe something was amiss. But the days went by, and distance ensued. He was busier, more distant. And then birthday week came around. Birthdays hold a lot of significance for me. Not superficially, however, because as a child they were always alone. My parents were too caught up in their own whatever to make it seem like a big thing. So as an adult, I held it close like a whispered promise that someone would one day make me feel seen on that one day of the year. So when he did not arrange anything, nothing, no dinner, no cake, it devastated me. He didn't even say, "Happy birthday," until half the day was over. And then too, in a manner as if an afterthought, as if only because someone reminded him of it. But what actually reset me was what occurred a couple of days later. I was told by a mutual friend that he had bought his sister this beautiful, expensive gift. A designer handbag. One of those only if you needed to impress or prove something. The same week he forgot about me. I was standing there in the kitchen, phone to my ear, reading the message over and over from my friend. My breast hollowed, like the air had been sucked out of it. I did not go at him that night. I couldn't. I huddled on the couch and wept quietly, trying to keep it from spilling out too loud. But it did. He picked up on it. "You okay?" he asked from the other side of the room, his voice weary but gentle. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." He nodded slowly, regarding me, as if he had to say something else but didn't know how. And I hated it. I hated the fact that now there was a wedge between us that I hadn't put there. I wanted to scream at him. Explain. Why was she so important? Why was my birthday something to be forgotten and her gift something to remember? But I didn't say anything. Not then. A couple of days afterward I snapped. Bedtime. We were brushing our teeth at the side-by-side sinks in silence, and I just gazed at him in the mirror and said, "Did I do something wrong?" He looked confused. "What?" "You forgot my birthday," I said, my tone softer than I meant it. "But you did remember to go out and buy your sister a $1,000 purse." He bristled. Toothbrush still clutched in his hand. Mouth half full of foam. And then he just stared at me, like I just said something to him he wasn't prepared for. "I didn't forget," he said finally, spitting out his mouthful. "You said it at noon. You did nothing. Not even eat. You didn't even make a card." My voice cracked over myself. He sat on the edge of the tub and massaged his face, like he was trying to gather up the strength to tell me something complicated. And then he did something that made my stomach turn over. I remembered. I just couldn't. I blinked. "What do you mean you couldn't?" He lifted his head then, and his eyes were tired deep, hurting with tiredness. "I got laid off 3 months ago." My heart plummeted. I said nothing because I thought I'd get it straightened out before you ever even realized something was amiss. I've been applying non-stop, freelancing, working whatever. But nothing's panned out. "That bag for your sister?" "I received it months ago." I was intending to give it to her on her graduation day, before I got laid off. I didn't know what to say. My brain flashed back over the last few months, the way he was always aloof, the way he clung to his phone, the missed calls, the late nights. I figured he was pulling away because he didn't care. But what really happened was he was thinking. I wanted to surprise you, he said, his voice rough. I had this planned, this everything. I was going to take the weekend off, your favorite place on water. I had set aside to do it. But that money came in handy to pay rent instead. And then it just snowballed. I felt like a failure. I didn't want you to look at me that way. Tears stung at my eyes. Not out of shame, but out of the throbbing stillness of watching the person you love suffer in silence, thinking that they were protecting you by closing you out. Why didn't you tell me? I asked him, my breath just audible. Because I didn't want you to look at me like I was broken, he answered. And now you do. I sat with him, cradled his hand in mine. He was cold, as if the weight of the world had drained the warmth out of him. I don't think you're broken, I said softly. I think you're human. And I wish you'd let me bear some of it with you. Then, we didn't speak that night. We just sat there, shoulder to shoulder, in the bathroom for a little while, in an unempty silence just full of all of the things that we were now coming to know. His hand stayed in mine, and I felt like I was close to him for the first time in weeks. Not because everything was fine, but because the truth was out. But the truth, it hurt. I was lying in bed with a tightness in my chest, no longer angry, but hurting over all the times I'd misunderstood him. The evenings when I thought he was uninterested when in reality he was scared. The dinner silences when I resented him for feeling so far away from me, when he was probably sitting across from me trying to devise a means of paying the bills for next month. I didn't know. I was so wrapped up in the grief of feeling that I wasn't loved that I never realized how diligently he worked to hold everything together with bony hands. The next morning, I gave him a head start. I woke up before him. I sat there and watched him sleeping for a minute. There was this tension in his face, even in sleep, like his body did not know how to let go, even when asleep. I reached out and longed to touch him face, smooth it out, tell him it was all right now. But I didn't. I just let him sleep. God knows he needed it. Later that day, I asked him to walk with me. We hadn't walked in years. It was our thing. Sunday walks and coffee and no specific destination we were headed to. He sounded hesitant, as if maybe he thought I was still angry, or that I was faking and telling him everything was okay. But he consented. We walked in silence for a bit, just watching the leaves blow in the breeze. It was cold but not freezing. I remember the way his fingers brushed against mine quite a few times before he finally extended and grasped my hand as he had always done. I'm sorry, he said to me. For what? I asked. For not trusting you enough to let you in on what was really going on. For treating you like you were an afterthought. You didn't deserve that. I squeezed his hand. I think we both lost focus on each other. He shook his head slowly. I kept thinking that I had to have it all together before I came to you. Like if I wasn't the guy who had his act together, then I didn't deserve to be in your life. That's not how this works, I said in a soft voice. I never expected you to be perfect. I just wanted you to be honest. He looked at me afterward, and there was this nakedness in his eyes. It's hard. When you're raised to believe that your worth is in what you provide, how much money you earn. It warps your head. I've always been the provider. To my mom, to my sister. I didn't know how to be vulnerable without feeling like a failure. I nodded, for I knew more than I could say. Not the same, maybe, but I had my own scars. My own conditioning. I was taught that love was something that one could buy, that attention was a form of currency. And when it was not given freely, something was wrong with me. So maybe that's why it hit me so hard, his silence, his distance. It brought all those old fears to the surface. And instead of inquiring, I assumed. I built scenarios inside my mind. ones in which I was being replaced, ignored, not loved. We sat on a bench under a bare tree, still clasping hands. We sat there for a moment, observing people pass us by, couples, children, a dog chasing leaves like it was the most important mission in the world. And I breathed a little easier for the first time in weeks. "I want to be better at this," he whispered. "At what?" "At being real. Letting you in. I don't want to keep secrets from you anymore, even the scary ones." I stood up to him. "Then don't. I can do hard things. I just can't do shut out." He touched my face, pushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "You deserve better than I've been giving lately. We'll make it happen," I said to him. "Together." And I meant it. But things did not magically improve overnight. That kind of pain, financial tension, emotional distance, trust broken, it does not magically vanish with the arrival of the truth. It takes time. It takes effort. And we both needed to figure out how to be present for each other again. There were still hard days. Days when I'd catch him daydreaming, clearly lost in worry, and I'd remind myself not to take it personally. Days when I'd relive that lost birthday all over again. But instead of stewing about it, we started to communicate. Really talk. He started opening up to me his job hunt, his financial worries, even his inner doubts. And I started opening up to my fears, how I'd unconsciously built walls, how silence left me feeling abandoned. We started meeting halfway. We didn't have much money, but we discovered small ways to love one another again. Instant coffee in bed for breakfast and peanut butter toast. Post-it notes on the mirror. Sitting on the floor listening to music and just being together without words. It wasn't grand or Instagram perfect. It was real. And it mattered. And then he got a job. A wonderful one. I still remember the look on his face when he told me the news, shock intermixed with relief. He didn't even celebrate at the moment. He just hugged me and muttered, "We made it through." And we did. But I bear with me the memory of that misunderstanding. Not as a scar, but as reminder. That sometimes love gets quiet. That sometimes it hides behind fear, or pride, or shame. And sometimes, the people who love you most are the ones hurting the deepest, but they just don't know how to say it. That experience also transformed the way I love. It taught me to ask, not assume. To reach out my arm, not retreat. To leave space for the chance that what looks like neglect might be someone's quiet attempt to protect you from their own storm. Looking back now, I realize how close we came to losing each other, not because of betrayal or something awful, but because of silence. Because of pride. Because neither of us knew how to say, "I'm struggling," without believing that we were failing. Once he got the job, things eventually settled into rhythm once more. Our schedules resumed. We laughed more. Touched more. The burden started to lift. But I don't think that either one of us ever forgot what we had to endure in order to get it. That thin edge between resentment and comprehension, how simple it was to cross over without even noticing. One night, maybe a month after all settling down, we were sitting on the couch, the TV humming along quietly in the background. He had his arm around me, and I was doodling patterns on the inside of his wrist just idly. And he said, sort of out of the blue, "I was going to get you a necklace." I turned my face towards him. "What?" "For your birthday. That's what I was saving for." I was in this little shop that produced their own. I recalled you mentioning you liked hammered gold, kind of an old-fashioned appearance. I was going to have it engraved. My chest tightened. "I didn't even think about the gift," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But I did. I wanted to give you something beautiful. Something that would say, 'I see you. I know what you've been through. I love you for all of it.'" And when I realized I couldn't even afford that, I felt like I didn't deserve to show up at all. I blinked back tears. It was strange, crying months after the pain had faded. But I suppose healing sometimes does that, does open old wounds you thought you closed. You don't cry because you're still tender. You cry because now you're finally safe enough to hurt fully. You still come, I said. Every day. He smiled. So do you. After that conversation, we decided we'd do something different. We established a new rule: no more pretending. If we're in danger, we tell them. If we're scared, we tell them. No more protecting each other by the method of lying. That's not protection, it's slowly poisoning us. It wasn't easy. Vulnerability reads well on paper until you go and actually do it. Until you have to sit face to face with the person you love and tell them, I feel small today, or I'm scared that I'm not enough. But those moments changed us. Made us more profound. Made our love something more, something real. Then later on, he did leave me that necklace. Not on my birthday. Not on a holiday. Just one morning. He just left it sitting on the kitchen counter with a note that said, "Thank you for staying." I wear it almost daily, not because it's expensive or flawless, but because it reminds me of what we went through. Of what it takes to love someone in their mess, their shame, their silence. And for someone to love you in yours. Other days, I still relive that night in the bathroom in my head. The way he looked at me, thinking he'd lost me. And I think about how many couples have sat in that same silence, just a few harsh words from breaking up. We almost didn't make it. Not through a lack of love, but because love, on its own, isn't always enough. It takes honesty. It takes vulnerability. It takes the courage to look at someone and say, I need you now. Not when I'm better. Not when I've gotten my life together. Now. That's what I learned. Not so much about him, but about me. I used to think love was shown through big moments, gifts, surprises, deeds. I've come to see that love shows up in smaller, quieter moments. In the hard conversations. The hands held through aching silences. The choosing of each other, even when the rest of the world seems to be falling apart at your feet. If I were to turn back around to the me standing in the kitchen that night, phone pressed to my ear, heart aching over something she did not receive, I would not tell her to desist. Because the pain was not an illusion. But I would tell her, ask. Don't assume. There's more going on than you can see. Because there almost always is. And now, when I find myself getting to the place of making up stories in my head, when he's standoffish, or distracted, or tired, I stop. I ask, what's happening? And 9 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with life. With stress. With worries he hasn't yet spoken. And sometimes it has to do with nothing at all. And that is okay too. We're not flawless. We still make mistakes. We still lash out at each other from time to time, still retreat into ourselves when the world becomes too much. But now we know it sooner. Now we reach for each other earlier. And we're smarter than to just grit through it in silence. That's what comes from misinterpreting the person you love pain. But if you're willing to walk through it, sit in the ache and excavate what's authentic underneath it all, it can make you more resilient than you were initially. It did for us. And I think, in the end, that's the kind of love that lasts. Not the ideal type, but the authentic kind.